So I'd like to hear any comment, any thought that you have from what you just see. Don't be scared, just get up and say what you're thinking. Because I know you have to be thinking something, right? So who wants to be the icebreaker? Woohoo! Awesome, check it out. Huh? Well, thank you, Opila for those words. Thank you, thank you. Do we got a microphone runner? Yes. All right. Did you guys over here what she said? Could you say it again? Because, wait a minute, the microphone's coming. Because they didn't hear that over there. Do you have another one? Because then we could have a microphone person here, my husband. Oh, give it to the man standing up. That's my husband. George. If you friend me on Facebook, I do a series called Life with George, because he's the man. He's the old res dude. What can I say? Old school guy. All right.
Okay. I just want to thank you, Sandy, and the people you brought together to bring this film to everyone, to the world. This is something that it really touched my heart, as I'm sure it touched everyone's heart here. And it's good medicine. It's good medicine for the students here. It's good medicine for the generations today and the generations tomorrow. And so what you brought forward is for the healing for all of our people, for all of our nations, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yechan.
All right, thank you. All right, any other thought or reflection?
I got you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Samuel Davenport. I'm here with the team of members, UCLA, representing the AMSW program. I think it was very touching to witness the power community has in establishing a foundation for people to understand themselves in the world that they're in. If it was one word that I took from it was empowering, right? It was inspiring. Just to go a bit further, I feel like if I consider my own identity as a Black man in this country and watching this documentary, I would use the word empowering because it helped me to understand how community can be used to help my people too, right? In the struggle that we've experienced, that we continue to experience. And, you know, I think it's a safe assumption to say that we will keep on experiencing if we don't, you know, establish the, again, community. We need to establish a barrier, right, against the forces that continue to tear us apart. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Who else has a thought or a reflection? Way over here, who's gonna get to her? Run, run.
Call me Forrest for the rest of it. I'm Jessica. I represent California State University Long Beach today. I'm also practicing I'm getting my MSW. I'm a practicing children's social worker for Los Angeles County. I would say that often in my field, ICWA is misused by people trying to extend their case and do a lot of things, and it gets a bad rap, especially with social workers who are trying their best to provide safety and permanency for children. And I think that seeing a film like this ties us back to why we use ICWA and the true purpose and the spirit of ICWA and why it is so important. And as my colleague was saying, the empowerment that it gives to a community in a time when we're so separated by our differences, to see how we all are connected and just are wanting to belong and to know who we are. I think this film is extremely powerful, more powerful than anything I've ever seen on ICWA or learned about ICWA, even in my training with the county. So I think that the more we can put a face to ICWA and a face to what it means to the people who have been impacted by the practices of the past and how it's still impacting them today, really helps when we're trying to practice ICWA in our social work, because it is practiced every day, and oftentimes social workers get frustrated by having to notice 5,000 tribes, but it's important work that we do, and it's important to do our due diligence, because for the one child that it reunites with their people, it's meaningful. So that's what I got from it.
Thank you. Well, and then just overall, the narrative that children will fare better when they're taken away from their families. And I don't know who in here grew up in a addict home or had abuse in their home. You still loved your parents. You hated them. You got mad at them. You were, why'd I have them for my parents? But they were still your parents, and they still fulfilled you in some way, especially once you were able to heal. But families are complicated, and families are in all kinds of stages of growth. It is never the best idea unless it is. I don't even care if it's a meth house. That doesn't mean that forever that child would be better over here. It just means mom or dad need help. They don't want help, but that's why you're a social worker. Well, how can I do this? How can I get that spark that I see in them? How can I do that? So, people say, well, what if it's a crack house? What if it's this? What if it's that? The narrative's messed up. It's back. It should be, the focus should be on healing the family. Who else? Way over here, George. Run.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alejandro. I'm getting my MSW at San Diego State University. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to watch your documentary. It was very powerful, especially because I remember last year I was doing a paper on ICWA, and that's when I first learned about it. And I learned about what led to its creation, such as the boarding schools, and then how the high likelihood of them being put into adoption and being sent into white families. And just seeing here just all the people that contributed to the documentary and just sharing their experiences in those boarding schools when they were adopted, that was really powerful. And then I remember learning that it was going to be heard and the Supreme Court was going to make a decision. And at the end, there is a reference to that. So I was super curious. I did Google because I didn't keep up with it as much as I should have. And I was really happy to learn that there was a ruling in favor of ICWA. And I'm just happy because, that means that this best practice, in social work will be maintained. But that's all.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, we were very excited that ICWA was upheld. We can talk about it later. I don't want to go into it. All right. I always have to say this. Am I doing it right? Are we good? You tell me when we need to stop. Next.
I have a question.
Oh.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I'm representing CSUN. Seeing the film, I see that there's a lot of history, and I'm also really appreciative of this film. Kind of going back what he just said, I know that recently in 2023, there was a case where they were trying to say that ICWA was unconstitutional. My question, I guess, is just kind of what your perspective on that, because I know in the film you talk about the percentage of what is defined to be Native American, and that's how they're basically like where they showed Dr. Phil, and they were like, oh, what percentage is that? Like, it's only 3%, 4%. And that was kind of something that recently happened within the last year. It was like they were trying to take over, even though the mother was agreeing with their child being adopted, there were Caucasian parents that were trying to adopt the child. And they were trying to say, like, oh, it's only a certain percentage of it. So my question is, like, how, as a community, do we, like, I guess, support that decision when it's, like, it goes up to the Supreme Court? Like, what can we do? I know we can support and educate and do all this. And as social workers, I think it was mentioned, it's so difficult to Like, we can do all our best efforts and constantly ask and ask and ask, but how do you go with other social workers that aren't doing it, and even with the like non-federally recognized tribes, like at the end of the day, it goes back to the judge and it's up to their discretion. So I feel like there's always these barriers for certain Indigenous individuals that don't really get to access ICWA the same way.
It's so frustrating because there is no consequence for not complying with ICWA. I don't know a judge, lawyer, social worker, or anyone who has been sanctioned for a federal law. But I can lose my driver's license, can be suspended because I haven't paid my parking tickets. So we could talk about all the legalities, but the bottom line is this society does not value children, especially brown children. That's just a reality that we live with. And when you can get past that and start educating people about this goes way back about with women, moms, and moms being also not valued. Women are still not valued in white society, in white law. So you have to start with educating about that we are human beings, right? And that so judgment gets in. I mean, you see it. If you're there, you see all that. You have to pray. You have to go to your spiritual leaders and you have to take care of yourself spiritually. That's the first thing that you have to do, be taking care of yourself in that way. And you have to share and talk amongst each other because that's how things change. I know that's probably like, I don't want to do that. But we give a little bit of insight when we come back with our presentation. She says only one more question. Who gets it? Drum roll. Oh dear. All right. Can we do two? She had her.
I only saw one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Criel. I'm representing Cal State San Marcos.
Wow, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you
Okay.
go. You gotta hold it like you're going to sing it.
I'm Wendy Criel, and I'm representing Cal State San Marcos. I'm also work for Child Family Wellbeing in San Diego. And one thing that made me really think about this is this should be part of our core training for our social workers because that will show the impact of ICWA. Me being in an executive role in child welfare, I want all of our social workers to see this because there is a lot of like, oh, it was more work or, they don't understand the noticing. This will really, really be impactful for our staff. So those were my thoughts.
You can do that, and me and Priscilla will come and do the training for you.
Okay.
Very true. I don't get that. I don't want to do the work. Well, you said you wanted to be a social worker, so right here, and then we have to go.
I'm like jingling through. Hello, my name is Alexis. So I
Put it up to your phone.
So I felt like the film was very inspirational, but I'm kind of left on like, I can see both sides. Like it's very hard for me to like definitively pick a side. So
It was hard for you to defend what?
No, to definitively like pick a side. Like I side with this. But the film mentioned blood quantum and the measurement of Indian ancestry. Do tribes do that? Do they pick and choose like, well, you're 25% versus you're 3%, and they kind of like choose, I guess, like you can be part of our reservation, but you can't. And another part was, do you believe there are flaws in ICWA itself in the Indigenous community?
First question, I don't really see any flaws in ICWA. Different tribes have different cutoffs for their blood quantums, and some tribes don't use any cutoff at all. However, the tribes that have cutoff often have what they call an ancillary role or some other role on the side. And there are some benefits and they recognize them as their relatives. You see, that's one thing that's different between white society and Indian tribes, is we see whether or not this blood quantum thing is, you're still our relative. You're still someone's niece. You are still someone's granddaughter. You are still someone's cousin. So we don't see it that way. But the history of blood quantum is another hour to talk about. And it developed by a man who raised quarter horses, and it was designed to breed us out. So it's not something we ever even, like, I don't meet people who go, "Hi, my name's Sandy. I'm 50% Indian. How are you?" We just don't do that. I mean, and we joke about it. We got all kind of jokes about it within our. I was in the probate office looking up some stuff, and he goes, "Holy, you might be a four-wheeler." Or, no, you might be a 4x4, which had meant I would have been whole, 4/4. But it's just recognizing that, we can take and tease like that, but the reality is that's not how we identify ourselves at all. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
Sandy?
Ooh, you guys are in for it now.
Here it comes.
One way to look at that blood quantum question is, would you love your grandkids less because they're 25% of who you are? Would you love your great-grandkids less because they're 12.5% of who you are? Or would you do your best to take care of them and love them and be a part of them?
Judge William Thorne.
Well said. I just want to, before we transition, ICWA is in place because of tribal sovereignty. And these attacks by Mark Fiddler and his colleagues is an absolute attack on sovereignty. So tribal governments have the authority, like any other government, to determine who their citizens are. The United States decides whether you're a United States citizen. So our tribes do the same thing. It's not any different than that. And in our communities, and our elders, I've had elders say, if you have one drop of Native blood, you belong to us. You're part of our community. So this whole blood quantum thing is smoke and mirrors, and it's not in ICWA. ICWA doesn't talk about blood quantum. That's a legal strategy that is being used by these lawyers who are attacking ICWA. And you can absolutely believe they are making money on those cases, and, we can, I don't want to get into Mark because that's a whole, he's the guy we love to hate in Minnesota and beyond.
Yeah, hello. Hello.
The one
I'd like
thing
to
he
say
said-
something about Mark. Because I think Mark is the exact example of why we need ICWA. Because if you remember in the film,
Exactly.
Mark's father was raised in boarding school, but never
Yes.
talked about it because
Yeah.
he was probably traumatized. And in
Yeah.
boarding school, you were taught to not like yourself and not be Indian, to hate being Indian. So that's how Mark's father raised Mark.
I did.
And so Mark has that historical trauma
does.
to not love who he is and to hate
Exactly.
being Indian.
Exactly.
So this is that
Yeah.
trauma passed down. So
And you can see that and hear that when you listen to his story.
and when he listened to his aunt or cousin,
Yes, his
yeah,
cousin.
you could tell the difference between
Yes.
how he was raised by a person from boarding school with that misparenting. Anyway, that's all we can say about Mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Karen Cold-Thorne.
Yeah. So, these are really big issues, but ICWA's federal law. That's the bottom line. And in many states, it's also state law. Does California have a state ICWA? So, you got two laws here that as a social worker, it's your job to follow these laws. And for me, that's the bottom line. You can talk about, is it extra work, blah, blah, blah. The reality, it's the law. And your supervisor should be holding you accountable to the law. our child welfare system, the way it currently operates, is not designed to take care of families. It's not. And so some of this, our systems really need to transform to become humane and compassionate and to care about families. And anyway, we'll talk more about this, but.
I gotta say one thing, since the marked door got opened. He really, he lies for real, because he and the lawyers that worked on that case of baby Veronica did submit bills to saying that, you know, they need to be paid for the work that they did. So they did do that. He also lied when he said that Dustin Brown gave up his parental rights through a text, the way he said that to Mike. He was manipulated by the baby's mother because they were working on her, and he was manipulated about that. In his mind, he thought he was doing the right thing, helping the mom. But he did not understand that she was going to relinquish baby for adoption. He thought he was, okay, well, I guess I have to do this in order to do the next step. And you might think to yourself, oh, how could you not know that? Well, I met him. We honored him at NCAI that year with Eagle Feather, and we told him that we, you know, acknowledge him and think of him. But he was in active duty. They never once referred to him as Specialist Brown, which he was. They just did, the whole thing was manipulated. But he did lie about that, and he did lie about Dustin. He did not know that this was all conjuring up until the very last minute. So anyway, I just have...
And Sandy, just real quick,
okay.
If you could just touch the, documentation is such a huge part of what you all do. And Dustin's name was misspelled when the tribe was noticed. His name was spelled E-N, D-U-S-T-E-N, and it was submitted as D-U-S-T-I-N, and there were 8 Dustin Browns in that tribe, and no one claimed the child because the birthday was wrong and the spelling was wrong. So every letter you write matters.
Yeah. And I didn't want Fiddler to be in the film. I fought with the filmmaker, but I'm glad it's there because we do need to talk about it. I did. I fought with him a lot. I made him cry.
So there's so much we could be talking about and following up on. I was just telling Tamara we needed 4 hours.
Yes, we
Because
did.
3 is not really enough. I do want to point out that you'll notice that we do have blood memory up there, and that's a real thing. And we now know by science that, we carry the DNA of our ancestors for 7 or more generations. And that's the hard things, that's the genocide that our communities experience, but it's also the resilience, right, and the strength. And it's so important to remember that piece, because I think it's really easy to stay focused on the really horrendous things. And they're important, right, but it's not the full picture, and we need to remember that. One of our elders that used to come to one of my summer institutes on American Indian Child Welfare used to say, the truth is the truth. And, Sandy and I were going to have T-shirts made.
Okay. He said the truth is the truth and can't be changed. So he made a great, he got a great example when somebody said, yeah, but the dad doesn't want to, he just now wants to be part of the child's life after 2 years, being real judgy, right? And he says, but it's still the truth that this is the child's father. How do we help them do this? And coming from that, it's been a real good teaching tool.
Next slide, please. Next slide. Sorry. So you know, you heard about this in the film. I'm hopeful you've been taught about this. You know, that legacy of child removal in our communities and the long-term inequities and trauma that has resulted. When you take away everything from a people, you take away their homelands, you take away their religion, you take away their systems of governance, and then you blame them, right? And then you break up their families, and then you blame them, right? So our communities live in really that legacy of economic poverty, and child welfare is really slow to acknowledge that. You know, that families need help and assistance. They need concrete resources, you know, and that removing their children continues that kind of disruption in our communities. And I'll talk in a little bit about how tribes are doing it differently, because I really believe the answers to this lie in our tribal communities. Next slide. So this is a model I worked on with some people for the Center for Tribes a while ago, and it's really recognizing that intergenerational protective circle around our children. And our kids are in the middle, but they're surrounded by family, extended family, cultural family, and all the things that make up a society, right? Our foods and our lifeways and our language and our traditions, our art and our dance and our music, and all of those kinds of things. And, you know, we were much more of a collective society than an individual nuclear family. And so that intergenerational connectedness, and in some of our languages, including the Anishinaabe language, the word for great-grandchild and great-grandparent is the same because they are connected. And so those teachings are embedded within our cultural teachings. And then we have in our communities what I call supportive care, and that's our programs that are designed for our tribal communities. And that's, to me, an opportunity for our tribes, our tribal child welfare practice to really change and restore that intergenerational connectedness. And then we have our tribal nations, and we always have to remember sovereignty. Otherwise, people try to make you into a racial group. And it is that political status that is really always critical to remember when you're talking about tribes. And that tribes have retained rights. They weren't given to us. We retain them from the time the colonizers came here. And that's the right to self-governance and to making a lot of those kinds of decisions. So I am fortunate to work with a tribe in northern Minnesota that's right next to my tribe, the Red Lake Nation, and they changed the title of their child. It used to be Child and Family Services, and they changed it to Intergenerational Family Wellness. And that's what they really focus on. It's about retaining kids with their families. It's not about removing kids. And if they have to do that, it's very temporary. And it's like 99% of their cases are with relatives. And those children, the expectation is they will return home to their families. In the last year, they have spent almost $2 million providing concrete resources to their families who come to their attention so those families can raise their children in a safe environment. So they've, cleaned homes, they've, restored homes that were, damaged. Of course, they have a lot of mental health services. Their mental health is incorporated within their child welfare system. So they staff cases together. They have cultural people who have a meaningful role in the organization. And they're really doing some fantastic work. And they've reduced their out-of-home placement since 2015 by almost 70%. That's the kind of work that gives me hope. Because I've spent many years trying to work with the state and the counties, and Minnesota has horrendous disproportionality. And there are a lot of good people in those systems, and yet the disparities don't change. And so my hope is in our tribal communities and our tribal programs, our urban programs. You know, I know my two aunties has been very successful here in California. Yay, Karen! And so it's that relative approach, right? That intergenerational connectedness. And Native people are really good at creating relatives wherever they go, right? So, you know, we need to remember that in our own communities. And I think our elder talked earlier about spirituality. You know, that's the core of our communities. And restoring that and returning to that and really living our lives, not just our personal lives, but our professional lives in a way that really resonates with our traditional values is the way we're going to make our way back, I think, to restorative practices. Next slide. So I like to talk about, because I'm a social worker, you know, the different levels that we need to do this. And I think, you know, Sandy talked about this too. So you have to be a self-reflective social worker. And that means knowing what your values are and living with that purpose consistently, whether you're at work or at home or in the community. And I think it has to be grounded in compassion, both for yourself but for others. The organizations you're going to work for, they all have practices and policies and values. So go there with a critical eye. You don't have to go along if your organization isn't following ICWA, you know, or if it's not reaching out or engaging with tribes. You can help change that. Individuals can make an enormous difference in whatever organization you go into. And you do that with humility, right? You're not going to tell people what to do. And you also partner with the tribal community in doing that, so you're not doing that work alone. And then stay connected to your community. If you were raised outside your community, try to go back and learn about that. You know, be really curious for yourself as well as for the people that you work with. Because there is something in collective healing that is incredibly powerful. And in that identity, and knowing that you're working on behalf of the community. You know, the thing is, in child welfare, it's very siloed, and your professional and your personal life aren't supposed to mix. In our communities, it's one and the same, you know, and you need to be authentic in the way that you choose to practice social work. Next slide, please. I could talk about this stuff all night, but I'm trying to hurry. So this is a picture, actually, of my husband and one of our grandsons. And I love that. And as Sandy pointed out, you see lots of pictures sometimes with grandmothers and babies. But our grandfathers play a tremendous role, I think, in implanting values and helping our children, our grandchildren, be raised in a good way. And, you know, it's that kind of intergenerational relationship building that's really critical. And I was raised in an extended family. And so it's really cool to see that happening with my own kids and grandkids. So ICWA talks, you know, one of the things that Mark and his colleagues like to do is talk about bonding to these white families. And he kind of talked about that. You know, this family not being compliant with ICWA ended up with, you know, this beautiful Indian baby, and then when it comes to court, when the tribe says, you know, this child was taken illegally, then they want to claim, well, now this child is really bonded to this family. So in my tribe, we believe that we choose our parents from the spirit world. And so no law can break that spiritual connection. And so you're not supposed to talk about bonding and attachment, but a lot of these adoption lawyers like to do that as a way to try to manipulate people into allowing that white family who got that child illegally to keep that child. And so I think being part of an intergenerational family and a community that values intergenerational connections is really, when you are raised outside your family, you really lose that. It's really hard. And you can get it back. I think Sandy's story is really powerful, but it's a hard journey, and it's a painful journey, and it's totally avoidable if you follow the law. All right, you're up.
Oh, we got two. Good. I was going to suggest that. Yeah, they dragged me. Oh, that's good. These two old ladies. I get up off the chair. Oh, she's more literally slow. I said, I did guess we're just two old ladies on the road. Oh, I'm not even. Can you hear me? Grunting and groaning up here. When our oldest grandson, I forget how old he was, 9 or 10, and George and I were starting to get a little older then, and so George would grunt when he got out of the car, so he started grunting when he got out of the car. This is what you do. You get up and go, oh! All right, so based on what I was hearing for years, I'm going to thank Mark Fiddler for pissing me off really bad when I was a qualified expert witness in a court case. And I said to Rebecca McConkey Green, I said, I'm going to do a study. We've got to do a study. So I'm not an academic. I'm not in school. I didn't got no degree. But I knew we could do it. So anyway, I found some people who the creator showed me like a little team, and we got together. We put out a survey, and I said, I want like a huge number. I don't want just 20 respondents. We need to have a lot. So 336 people responded to our survey of all races. 129 identified as First Nations, and we used 95 of those 129 because 95 of them had been reunited with their family. But check out what we found out. It's exactly what we've been hearing all along. So when I was first sharing this information, I couldn't understand why people are not working double time now. I just don't understand that. I mean, wouldn't you just look at that and go, oh, what are we doing? But is it because you got to build up a wall of denial? You don't want to think that that's what you're doing? But you're really taking a huge risk, placing a child. A huge risk. And just the amount of sexual abuse, the physical abuse, and the emotional abuse. When I've heard such incredible, heartless things that not the mom or dad even, but what their cousin, adopted cousin, their uncle, their aunt say to them. And so that's a good, look up our study on wearecoming.home.org. There are 5 studies there, papers there, on all aspects of removal, and use it. Say, when you're writing your case, when you're saying, wait a minute, no, we don't know for sure this child's going to be safe. Can we just work on getting this family in a better place? so that they can stay together. Oh, should I tell them about Brad Keene? Is this the time we do it? Okay. So, you want to set it up? Oh, okay. Oh, I got another thing. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. She keeps it together. I don't know what I'm doing. All right. With this should really be enough as well. If you didn't even see that first part, then looking at this, check this out. Look at the contemplated or planned suicide, 43 of the 95. And the reason I believe that is we don't have a language when we're going through this. There's emotional isolation. We don't have a language to say, I don't feel like I fit in. I never said that till I was way older and was able to start talking about it when I was in my early stages of recovery. And 20 of them attempted. And how many did we actually lose to suicide? We'll never know that. Eating disorder, and then the depression rate, look at that. It's higher than what the CDC, next, you click something and then it comes up. Anyway, it's higher than the average, just says 1 in 10. One more. Oh, never mind. But anyway, there's a little thing on the bottom that says the CDC says that 1 in 10 Americans may experience depression, but we're way ahead of that mark as well. So, all right, next. This is me too? Okay. So anyway, when you think of a collective wound, you know, you've all heard Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart has talked about a collective wound, right? That the sweeping of children from boarding school, the sweeping of us from adoption. And so the thing that we're not working with then, if we're not doing something public like welcoming our relatives back or doing another ceremony, that addresses this disenfranchised grief where that's never been publicly acknowledged or validated. So it's certainly the adoptees, the birth mothers, the fathers, the grandparents. Everybody's impacted by our removal. So what we do in bringing our relatives back is addressing that disenfranchised grief. Because at the end you saw we had everybody come out and shake their hand. We never once said, welcome them home, say words to them, and they don't. The community just comes out and automatically nurtures with their words by saying, welcome home. We're glad you're here. Because we're a healing people. That's who we are as Indian people. We're very nurturing. When we're in our best place, that's who we are. Next.
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah.
So I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I love this slide. I don't know who's seen this or not, but ACE's Connection is a great resource, and they put out great stuff. This slide really just gives you the whole picture, right? Because the child welfare also focuses on individual families, but our families are within a context, right? A historic context, as well as an environmental context. And the child welfare system doesn't acknowledge that, but our tribal programs can and know about this because it's us, right? So we know about this in a way that public child welfare just doesn't. Next slide. So we want to get into talking about the resilience part and how do you help create resilience. Do you want to do this one? She just settled.
Dang it. Gotta just get up and grunt. Okay, so that happens. You turn 70, it's all over. A switch goes off and there you go. All right. So, and it's interesting that I talk about this because I hate that word resilient because it gets I've had so many people tell me, oh, but your people are so resilient. I said, and I actually said to somebody one time, they made me mad enough where I just said, so that gives your people the right to do that to us because it won't matter because we can bounce back? Because that's what it felt like to me, right? Oh, we can rip that child. They can just, like for myself, when I tell the story of the experience of being taken and put in the truck, and I remember it as I'm observing it, because I left my body and I went into the back of the truck and I watched that whole interaction through disassociation. So I disassociated at 18 months. And some years ago, people would have said, mental health workers would have said, well, you're too young to do that. Well, then why'd I do it? And I'm not the only one. I've heard so many people who've been removed through adoption or foster care who were very young and they disassociated also, thinking that there was something wrong with them. But that's because it's so painful and terrifying. And so I disassociated several times throughout my life. The last time I did, I was 11 years old, and it was through an abusive situation. So so I'm resilient and back, but was hell getting back. So one of the things that, there's this list here of all the points that can bring resiliency. Boy, I'll tell you a story about Indian names. So the White Earth tribe asked us to bring their foster youth who lived in the city of Minneapolis up to their reservation and plan activities with them. We had a great time. We took them all over the res, took them to the, tribal buildings. They could see that there's a government here. We took them picking sage. We did all kinds of things with them. And then we took them then they went to Sweat that night, one of the last nights we were there. My husband and I tried to find it. Me and George were just driving all over those woods. We never did find that Sweat. But the next morning, we came into the room. Every morning we would have breakfast in the casino, and they had the room set up really nice. Well, anyway, but before, I forgot to add that one of the young men in this group of kids was just one of those kids would be, don't do this, then he does it kind of kid. I really liked him. I thought he was cool. And he wasn't super disruptive, but just enough to just, do that. And people got a little frustrated with him a couple of times, but I don't know, I just knew he was releasing that energy that he had to get out of him. Anyway, that morning after the Sweat, George and I came in and sat down, and he pops up and comes over and says, hi, you guys want some coffee? We're like, okay. And he goes and gets coffee. Now, there's breakfast here for us, and he's telling us all about this. And I'm looking at him and watching him, and he was distinctively different. And then finally somebody later on said, he got his Indian name last night. I said, really? And it moved him so much that change started immediately. And he had that connection. And you just kind of stopped doing all that. It was amazing. Our names, remember, tell us who we are, where we come from, and where we're going to be in the future. I wish I could remember his name. It's like, because, that he's outliving his name, I'm sure, like we all do. At some point, if you have an Indian name, and you've said it in your introduction and where you are, at some point you're going to go, oh, that's why I got that name. Because the Spirit saw you, and they told the interpreter, the person leading that, told you your name, because they know who you are. It's healing. It's the power that we have as Indian people. So when our little people don't know their name, don't know where they're from, they're lost or they feel lost. It could be 16, 17, 18, you still don't know who you are. I was 47, 46, somewhere there, before I received my name. And Priscilla was one of the people who would always remind me, well, that's because your name stands in the center, woman. And the more I listened to that, the more she pushed me, I realized that is who I am. But the center doesn't mean the center of the stage. The center means our altar, the place where all our prayers are said, the place where we ask for the spirit helpers to come. And that's my place. So anyway, we don't know what leaders we're missing when we don't get their names in some of these other activities that help with their resiliency. We got to find a word. We need an Indian word for resiliency in the language, so it means more to us than just saying resilience.
I agree. So there's lots of ways. These are also good self-care things to do, and it's not, it's not your fault if you don't have your Indian name, right? That was what colonization was designed to do, is to stop those kind of practices, and so it's never too late to talk to somebody from your community and get your name, and we also take in people from other communities. Sometimes we just adopted someone who's from Alaska originally, who doesn't have those connections back in her community. And Sandy and I are her aunties now. So there are ways to do that, because we always find ways to heal and support each other. Next slide, please. So again, another slide that I really like about, our systems are moving. I believe public child welfare is trauma reactive. They're in a system that is very siloed and fragmented and rigid, and we're moving towards being more trauma informed. And that's good movement, right, to move in that direction. But we want to get to a place where we're trauma reducing and we become healing. And that's where I see, again, that happening in our tribal communities and our tribal programs, because that's our nature. The things underneath there about being holistic and, really reflecting in our values and working together and being relationship-centered. Those are tribal values. And so I think it's easier for us to move in that direction than it is for public child welfare. I mean, I'm never going to give up on them, but, I just see so much progress in terms of tribal communities and tribal organizations doing that healing work. Next slide. So I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but this is kind of the journey, right? Where people start to be aware of trauma. There's much more awareness than there ever has been. And then you learn how to deal with it a little bit better. And then you understand that, yes, there are adverse things that happen, but also positive things. You become more healing-centered, and hopefully we'll end up with a society that's much more equitable and justice-focused. Next slide. This is our coming home ceremonies.
So you see on the right, that was our first year, 2015. This is a flyer that was sent out. So remember, as you're watching and looking at this, your tribe could be doing this. It just takes asking a spiritual helper, and you can do this within a program. Like Marlise wrote it into her Tiwahi Glukinipi, Bringing the Family Back to Life program. So there's ways to insert it. So you just give them your information. White Earth was actually the first tribe other than my tribe to want to do this and that. That's when I started thinking we need more Indian words so that people can start understanding what's happening. So for us, Wichoachagi, Kiun Kupi, you heard that in the film, generation after generation, we are coming home. And that makes, when we use our language, it wakes us up more, solidifies what we're doing, and gives us that energy to move forward. And so in the Ojibwe language, I can't say that. Can you say that, Priscilla? Huh? That there is a returning. Do you know how to say that?
We are wem.
Yep.
We are wem.
There is a returning. So one of their language keepers who's fluent, who was also removed through foster care. But when he came home, he just immersed himself back in, and now he even teaches the language. So his thought was that. So when you educate your community, when you start talking about it, they can use that language, that there is a returning, and there is. Every single gathering, social gathering, powwow, there is somebody there looking for their relatives. Always, because that's where everybody is, right? So they go and they might start asking around. They may be timid about it, but trust me, they're there. And so after several years, 2007 is when White Earth Nation first came to us to do this. My tribe finally said, okay, let's do it in 2015. Now, Priscilla and I have been doing work all this time. And one time, she had a conference in the summer called the Summer ICWA Institute. And she said, I want to do a welcome home after our conference. And I'm like, yeah, of course. We could do that, set that up. So we did, made a flyer and said, please come. And the first year, there were certainly people there that witnessed it. So the second year, there was people there, but the third year we did it, several ladies showed up, and a lot of the community came, because it takes a little while, you know, for people to talk about it and spread it out into the community. And these girls show up, young ladies, and said, how can we help? We're ready to so we threw them in there and put them to work to help bring our relatives home. And that was telling Priscilla, that this is what our communities need. So it's not only addresses grief of the individual who was removed, but the relatives as well. And because it was dealing with grief and using song and our medicines to address that, one year, a social worker who is like ICWA royalty in Minnesota came out because she was carrying a lot of grief from all those cases. You know how hard that is. And she came up with it, and others followed in suit to have that grief addressed as well. And then COVID hit. So we haven't done anymore in Leech Lake after this conference. Things changed, but if it's meant to be, it'll come out again. But you know, when COVID hit us, I don't think we knew that things were going to be shifted and different and getting our balance back after COVID. So, but it was really a collective healing. And it's, you know, it's really, I don't want to say it's really easy to do, but I'll tell you, if this is something that's in your heart that you want for your community, go see one of your elders, your spiritual helpers. Tell them what you're seeing and ask them for help. And this came about, and I didn't even ask for help. I didn't know how to, like, he had to tell me, you better give me tobacco, you just had a vision. I'm like, what do you mean I had a vision? I haven't been on the hill starving you know, the 4 days you're supposed to say. I said, I have not. He goes, it doesn't matter. The Creator will put in your heart what you're to do when He knows you're ready. So somebody out here will have that. So trust that when it comes.
I just want to add to that. I mean, it's really powerful to be at this. And the Summer Institute that I ran for a number of years, we included ceremony. So we usually did a sweat the night before. We opened with pipe, and then we had traditional songs throughout there. So when we did our welcome home ceremony, we used our ceremonial drum and our ceremonial drummers, and they were really surprised at how the community embraced that. And, you know, it's really powerful. So don't be afraid to add ceremony into your organizations and your events, because that really is where our strength and our healing come from. And just remember that. Don't be afraid to do that. Because these were university funds. They were $40. And we did all this really cool ceremonial stuff, included our community, and our community got really invested. So there's really, you can make a huge difference by just remembering where you come from.
When they're on the third one that we did, when I said so many people came, the singers had to take a break because they were like,
So many people.
we got to take a break and get our throats, give a little bit of a rest. And so it was the most awesome problem to have, is to our singers have that time to rest their throats.
So now I think we're just doing questions. That's our last slide, or comments.
Okay, microphone dudes, where are you? As I look over there. Anybody has a question or comment based on what we just shared? I know somebody's thinking something.
It's late.
They're young. We're old.
It's past
They
our
gotta be-
bedtime.
When they get done here, they're going to be on, TikTok forever. You got a question, you got a thought, come on.
Hi. So I have a question. My name's
Okay, elder
you
first.
Sorry.
We're going to let this elder speak
Okay.
first, then you can.
George. Hello. This is there's no words to be said.
Can you hold it a little closer?
There's no words to be said because of the spirit of the strong heart nation of this generation that has been for generations to generations that us Indian people have been traumatized through this. And through this time and through this generation, through this prayer, it has come up to here for these ladies to come and to be a part of that, to be a strong heart, to carry this burden upon this, to understand and getting frustrated, getting elderly, body aching, and still going and doing this, and continuing on for the next generation that's going to come. And this is where you guys fit in, because it's bringing both worlds together. And as both worlds together with mind, body, and spirit, when they were asking about what color, we're all related. We're all family. And today we need to work together to heal this generation. I want to say thank you. Because the hard times and the hardships that you've brought you this far on your journey in life to come to understand, to have that love in your heart, to touch the other people in this way. It's a beautiful thing, you know, and I see this, but the thing is that it's even more beautiful is that we're here together and we stand together. Because to help this next generation, the future generation, from all these things that was shown on the slides. So we have our job to fulfill. And as these ladies were saying, that the Creator will bring you and put you in these places in this time when it is becoming your time. to grow and understand, and to be driven through that spirit. To be driven through that spirit, because that spirit, generations ago, that they prayed that they can carry this on. So we have to carry this on today like this, to understand, because it's about the future generation. It's about the children, the great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I'm a UCLA student. My question is, your slide shows a lot of the ACEs stuff, right? And I think that it's extremely important to acknowledge what a great tool that is. But I'm at DCFS in LA County, and unfortunately, that's not a tool that we utilize. Are you aware of any kind of like movement that's pushing for county work to use that tool so we can address this in a holistic way?
There are a lot of pockets that are, I mean, ACES is a movement as well. And so I use it just as a great resource, but I can't remember, I don't know enough about California to be able to speak about, you know, what's available here. But it seemed to me there was some group, okay, maybe wrong state I'm thinking of, but I think there are people who are using it more and more. And public child welfare, I do a lot of training and research in public child welfare. They really are starting to understand that the current system doesn't work for anyone. And especially if you are Indigenous or from a minority community, it's disastrous in our communities. And so there are people who are really trying to work on policy. Families First was supposed to do that, but it didn't quite hit the mark. But it's going to take a long time. And that's why I really believe in our tribal community's ability to adapt quickly and to change. I was just at a conference last week, the Tawahi conference, and they're from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which, you know, historically was not a good thing for us. But they have, I think there are 10 Tawahi tribes now across the country, and they get unrestricted funds to use any way they want for family preservation and cultural preservation. And these tribes are doing enormous things. So you can just go on the, you know, Google Tawahi or go on the BIA website and look for it. There are some really good tribal models available out there. And there are some good public child welfare models as well. The Child Welfare League of America, who also has a dubious past with our communities, but we've been working on a couple of journals that look at providing concrete supports for families with neglect. And there are some really model programs. There's a journal came out a couple of years ago, and there's another one that'll be out in about a year. So there are models available out there. You kind of have to go look for them.
I wanted to mention very quickly, you can come after this because I got to say it so we don't forget. So the case that was just recently decided where ICWA was upheld by the Supreme Court,
Brackeen.
Our study, one of our studies was cited. Gorsuch cited that one of our FNRI studies on that. So the message behind that is if any of you here are thinking, well, you know, I want to know this outcome about it for our Indian families and develop a survey, do this, do your work, get it published. I wanted people in the lower courts to use our study. I wanted social workers to go in and say, hey, why are we doing this? Look what could possibly happen. And I don't think anybody is. But the Supreme Court said, well, according to this study, which was ours, you know, the outcome is not looking like something that we want for our families. So that made us all really proud, really happy, but also told me the power of doing really good research. And if I can motivate that, and I'm not an academic, You who are in college know those ropes. You know what you need to do it.
Yeah, that's really true. The other thing I would just say, if you have not read the Brackeen decision, if you really want to understand ICWA more deeply, read the full decision, because there's a wealth of information. They did a very good job looking at the literature, including Sandy's report. One of my friends from Leech Lake, she was also recognized in the Brackeen case, and so it will give you a really deep understanding.
There she is.
It's me again. Hi. My question actually is in connection to your statistics that you showed. My role with LA County is working in what's called resource family support. So what we do is we renew certifications for foster families. And part of that is doing the rescissions of those licenses when things go wrong. But oftentimes I find that we're fighting harder to take the license than we are to take children from their biological parents, because these foster families have quite a lot of rights, some to which I personally don't believe they should be entitled, because being a foster parent is a right, not a privilege, not a right. And so my question is, we fight these battles on an individual basis, case by case. What do you recommend in such a litigious state as California to point people in the right direction when making these laws? Because they're making laws that they think protect our children, such as SB 354, which extends the amount of criminal exemptions we give relatives when we're trying to approve someone for the child to go to. But how do we point that back in the direction of the biological parents and putting these kind of family preservation things in place, rather than supporting the foster families, putting that support towards the parents?
Right, and that's why there's a movement to really understand that in particular families where the charges are neglect, that they need concrete supports, not to have their kids removed. And so there's quite a bit of literature out there, which I'm blanking right now, but Chapin Hall, I want to say, does quite a bit of literature around that. And there are things like guaranteed family income, those kind of, pilot projects that have shown great support, that even providing a relatively small amount to a family in poverty, like $200 a month, really keeps those kids from going into care. And then, there's no one quick answer, right? I really think child welfare needs to become more humanized and to recognize the harm that child welfare removal does. Because I think for a long time it was about saving kids, but kids weren't being saved. And in many cases they were far worse off in the out-of-home placements they were put in than if they had remained home. So we need to support families, in particular families in poverty, and some of that is just giving people resources, and then really working on healing trauma, generations of trauma caused by genocide, and acknowledging that, the role the system has played. So there's not one easy answer, but there is a lot more research out there than there used to be. It's hard when you're a practitioner, right, to try to do research. So maybe I'd say partner with your tribal communities, and also partner with the university that has a child welfare program. Maybe they, are involved in doing some of that research about family preservation.
If you Google abolishing child welfare, all kinds of stuff would come up. I wish I could remember names.
Upend is a big national movement to upend child welfare. There are lots of organizations across the country. A lot of parents with lived experience are starting to really find their voice and band together to really challenge the child welfare program, and that needs to happen.
Yeah, there are books published and recent papers published, and a lot of work out east.
Yeah.
Really working at it.
New York has done, I think their state has, I can't remember the exact language, but they really want to basically abolish child welfare as a state. And so finding those, trying to influence policy and practice to really do things differently. If you look at our data, it shows how bad our system is, and so why would you keep supporting a system that has such poor outcomes? Resource families should be that, right?
Yeah.
They should be a temporary resource. They don't own those kids, and I think, a lot of tribes don't terminate parental rights. So when Fiddler says they do that, again, that's not true. Most tribes don't want their kids to end up outside their community. They just need supports to keep them home.
Any other questions or comments?
It's probably late.
We don't care.
When you give her a microphone, it's hard to get her to stop.
Well, we do need to be done, but what's frustrating at times is it feels like we don't have enough time to really dive deep. And so but that's, we've got to be realistic. We can't be here till 10 o'clock, but if I had my way, we would. Is it time to end? Okay. She's a good timekeeper. I really appreciate the energy you guys had. I really appreciate the attention that you gave us, and the comments and the questions were awesome. And I appreciate all those words said. And we could
Stay
still...
curious.
What?
Stay curious. Thanks.
Stay curious, she said. And if something just comes to you and you're thinking of things, move on it. Just do it. You'll always find someone else thinking what you're thinking. And if you go to your spiritual leaders, that's where the power is. And Chris told me not only you can't stop a vision, but any change or anything that's going to happen has to come from the grassroots people. That's where the power is. So that's where you go. Thank you, guys.
you.